I love that because it's such a great, yeah. It's inspiring to me because it's changing the story of what's going on, what the conflict is, and how we're managing it, and how we're managing through it, and how we're creating conversation and opportunity by talking to each other and thinking creatively about the future. And our next guest is one of the most innovative thinkers in the world today in terms of how timber can gain new life. So please join me in welcoming Michael Green, who is the principal architect at MG Architecture in Vancouver, Canada.
Hi.
Thank you, guys.
I am an architect, but I'm going to start with a slightly different perspective on telling the story of timber, and I'll get you there in a few minutes. It starts in 1950 with a really incredible invention by the food industry called the TV dinner. And the story of the TV dinner is quite amazing. We spent the first 50 years of the last century really trying to engineer and figure out how to make food products better. And we did that by developing different techniques of processing that were fast and economical, and developed chemical enhancement to our food products in ways that would stay longer on the shelf and so forth. And we thought we were doing wonderful things for food. But of course, that filled our shelves with great food that we could eat and tasty cookies and so forth. But eventually we decided that we should also put labels on some of that food. And when we did and started studying the nutritional labels on those cookies that we all love, we realized maybe this stuff isn't all that it's cracked up to be, and we need to balance our diet a little bit differently. And when we did, we stopped walking down the center aisle of the grocery stores so much, and we started moving to the edges of the grocery store again. And this really happened in the last decade or so, where we started remembering that the things that grow and that we eat, and the things that ultimately are grown by the sun, or the things that are fed by things grown by the sun, are really healthy foods that really create this statement. We want food to be delicious, healthy, local, fast, cheap, and good for the planet. Well, in doing so, not only did we get better food, but Oregon came to become one of the great places for the local food movement and for the sustainable food movement. And Oregon has become well known, not just locally, not just regionally, not just nationally, but around the world, thanks in part to these folks. Known for great food and great food leadership and innovation in food products. So, yeah, I am an architect and I'm talking about food, and you're probably wondering where I'm going. And the reason is that the TV dinner is actually not unlike a lot of what's happening within the building industry. For the last century, we've been building buildings in really innovative ways and adding through engineering and science and technology all these new products and ways of protecting and preserving our buildings, just like that TV dinner. But we've started reading the labels on our buildings as well. And what we've noticed is we're doing a whole lot of things that maybe we need to challenge in the status quo. And part of that is that in the United States, 47% of our carbon emissions are related to the building industry. A lot of people don't realize that. It's not transportation, it's not industry as a whole, but it's buildings, the making, operating of buildings that represent about half of our climate impact in the United States. And when it comes to energy use, it's the same story. Almost half of our energy use goes into buildings, the making and operating of buildings. So this is a huge impact industry on the issue of the environment. And today, about half of us in the world live in cities. But what we're going to see is over the next 30 or 40 years, another quarter of the world's population is going to move into cities, and that means we are going to be building a lot of buildings. And the challenge we have is if you think back to those huge statistics and the footprint that buildings have on the environment, it's not a sustainable thing when you think about how climate and the environment are going to interact with urbanization and population growth around the world, not just here in Oregon. But ultimately that those two things are at odds with each other and there's a collision, and I think that collision is also an opportunity and a great opportunity for Oregon to once again lead America in a new conversation about not what food will be, but what buildings are going to be. So going back to 1950 and the TV dinner, I'm going to talk about how buildings really have become the same thing. We have the building materials that we build with are not as sustainable as they might be. And in fact, in cities, that being the place where we're going to start building more and more and more, the materials that we build with have large carbon and energy footprints. And so it's not that we are going to change these materials. They're great materials. They're great inventions of mankind. But it means that just like our diet, we need to reproportion our diet so that our buildings, just like our food, are beautiful, healthy, local, fast, cheap, and good for the planet. So obviously the building industry in general is a huge component of any economy, and the green building industry is becoming a huge part of our business opportunities. And choosing where you invest as a business or as a region or a community or a state is very much about choosing what are the sustainable measures, and I like to think it really does stem back to the produce aisle. We want our buildings, like our food, to be grown in a renewable way and grown by the power of the sun, not the power of energy that we have to make. Why would we not do that? In doing so, we have a new opportunity, and of course that brings us back to the timber conversation, and I think we're going to see a new wave, and I'm going to show you why, of how timber is going to change the way we build. And part of the story, if you don't know the statistic of why wood in particular is so important to consider as a building material in this next century, is that unlike any other building material, major building material I can build with, wood has the capacity to store carbon dioxide instead of emit it. So actually 1 cubic meter, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet roughly, of wood stores 1 ton of carbon dioxide. Well, if I take that material and put it into buildings, I'm actually creating a vehicle to store carbon. I'm using a material that's the lowest energy, lowest water impact material I can choose as a major material. Of course, it means I also have to choose it from certified forestry. Now, if you think wood buildings look like this, you're right, and this is the way they have looked in North America largely for the last century or more, and this is the way we build in the suburb. But as you saw in that statistic, we're moving into cities, and you can't think of wood necessarily performing in this way in the cities, and so now we have what we call advanced wood technology, and it's a whole new game changer of what we can do, and specifically we have what's called mass timber. Mass timber are these value-added large-scale panels, and they look like these. These are small sections of them, and they're called CLT, LVL, and LSL, and I'm going to point to CLT. It stands for cross-laminated timber. And what it is taking relatively low-grade wood, gluing it together at angles to each other into very, very large panels. So rather than just small sticks like that previous picture of how we built, we're building with these large panels. And the panels can be 40 feet long and 10 feet wide and various thickness, which is dramatically changing the way we build with wood and the scale of the way we build with wood. And it's opening up this new opportunity for us to build, especially in urban environments. As you can see with these buildings, the panels are enormous. This is a project of mine that we completed up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and it's where we took these large CLT panels and tilted them up to make the structure. It's an incredibly fast and effective way to build where that building is storing carbon rather than emitting carbon. It's the only way to get to a net zero building is to build with wood products. So on the outside, this is what that same building looks like. The outsides of buildings may not change, but the way, the bones, the structure of these buildings will, because mass timber is changing everything about the future of the way we build. It changes how we do things structurally, the speed of construction, the cost of construction is changing. Fire safety with wood is completely different in this technique than it is in other ways, so it's opening up new opportunities of where and how we build. Durability, lifespan, health of the occupants, and environmental performance are all different, and timber is on this new menu, and specifically mass timber is the new menu of buildings that I think are going to be part of architects' choices in the future, and engineers and contractors and developers. So it also means that these materials can do larger and larger buildings. And so we have actually been exploring 30-story tall wood buildings and engineering for them, which I believe is possible because we live in a forest of Doug fir trees that grow to 33 stories. And so rather than just thinking of small-scale wood buildings, we've started moving to large scale. And 30 stories is very much possible. This is a drawing of a project in New York that we've been playing with at 30 stories for Cornell University, and this is a recent building we finished that's currently the tallest modern wood building in the world in northern British Columbia that is made entirely of wood. There's concrete that is the foundation. It's very important. We need concrete for that. There's steel. It's important in the connections, and then there's wood that's very important in the way we build the building. By building this way, we can build cost effectively, we can build large, and we can build in more environments, but we need the wood. And we need these advanced wood products to be built. And I think Oregon is best positioned to provide that. And Oregon's positioned that way because, as you know, Oregon's the largest producer of wood products in the United States, and nobody makes these products currently in the United States, the CLT product. Currently, I have to source it from Canada or source it from Europe, and believe it or not, the European material is coming to North America for projects we're doing in Minneapolis and Atlanta, because we can't get that material here. That's wood being imported to the United States rather than us exporting it as we should. So Oregon, again, 1 in 20 jobs, you know these statistics, go into the forest sector, and we plant here in Oregon 40 million trees a year. So this is an opportunity not only to improve Oregon cities, where these buildings are going to be built, but increase jobs, add value to Oregon wood, and improve Oregon's rural economy. The thing is, these buildings are happening already. If you find this strange and a new conversation you haven't heard of, these buildings are happening. They're happening all over the world. They're just not quite happening in the United States yet. And yet they are beginning to happen more and more. And the USDA has just put money in specifically to promote a future of taller wood buildings and new types of buildings using these advanced wood products. And these are the sizes of projects going up around the world or being discussed around the world today in wood. But to do that, at the end of the day, this is a race. And I think Oregon, I'm here because I very much believe Oregon is the best positioned state in the United States to lead this race, if not lead this in the world. And to do so, that means we need Oregon's forests to drive and feed the engine of this race and ultimately fill the plate with these new products that we need to make a better future. Thanks so much.